All right, folks, I want to continue our focus on California and direct attention to a series of legislation that, quite frankly, when looked at collectively, paints an extremely troubling picture. And joining me now to talk about this is Alvin Lui. He's the president of Courage is a Habit, which has put together a resource on California's transgender trafficking model. You got that right. Transgender trafficking model. Alvin, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back. It's nice to see you again so soon.
Great to see you again, as always. All right, look, before we put the picture together with all the pieces of the puzzle, tell us about specifically the 5 pieces of legislation that collectively are just horrifying.
So it all starts in the schools, as with anything else. And so the schools are keeping transgender secret from parents. They have basically 2 lies that they've built this entire transgender trafficking model on, but they started it in schools. That's a genesis. And the 2 lies are this: they will kill themselves if you don't allow them to mutilate themselves, children. And parents are unsafe and abusive if they don't agree to the transgender cult, the transgender social delusion. That's it. Those are the 2 lies that they've built all this on. Obviously, there's no studies that prove it. There's no logical common sense that shows that. You don't give in to suicide threats. It's all driven by the schools. But beyond that, that's the lie. And so the transgender secrets start from schools. Okay. Now in California, I know that you have a lot of listeners from around the country and maybe even outside the country. I want to remind everybody that California is the closest thing we have to a crystal ball. Okay, closest thing. So don't roll your eyes because you're in a red state. What I'm about to tell you, it doesn't matter if it's a red or blue state. Okay, you're going to have some variation of this, or they're working on some variation of this. So this California model starts with transgender secrets in schools, and that's in all 50 states. Okay, I don't care if you're in a red state, all 50 states, schools are doing it. Now, California passed something last October in 2022, October and November 2022, called SB 107. That's the original transgender trafficking bill. It states that if a child from another state crosses over to California and they say, my parents don't want me to they don't agree with me having any transgender procedures, drugs, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, surgeries, California will separate the child. They will not return the child to the parent, even if the parent comes looking for them. It's state-sanctioned trafficking. And that's SB 107, okay? Now, that bill has now been replicated across several states. It's a copycat bill. But moving on to the next bill, AB 957 in California, that's the in-state transgender trafficking. It means that if you as a parent don't succumb and agree to the transgender procedures, they can remove your child. Again, not out-of-state children now. This is in-state children. And if you have custody battles, the courts will most likely favor the parent who agrees to the transgender procedures, mutilating surgeries, body-destroying drugs. The next bill after that is SB 956. Now, SB 956 is what we call the intimidation bill. And what that says is that it's going to criminalize parents for speaking out against any school professional. Any school counselor, teacher, principal, school board, you name it. If you speak out against them on social media, if you write them an email, and all it has to be is that they've got to feel threatened. They have to feel emotional distress. So obviously that can fall under anything. $500 to $1,000 fine, up to 1 year in jail for the high crime of defending your children in school. That's SB 596. And then AB 665 is a mental health bill where it says children as young as 12 can separate himself or herself from her parents if they believe they need mental health services. Now, mental health services is not what you and I talk about, what you and I are thinking about. They're talking about the parents, let's say, don't agree with almost anything very, very radical and progressive. You don't believe in climate changeism. You don't believe that America is systemically racist. You don't believe in defunding the police, reparations, obviously the transgender social contagion, on and on. If you don't believe in that, that's mentally abusive, and your child can at 12 years old can separate themselves. Okay. And then the final one is SB 407. That states that a foster family, in order, you want to be a foster family, you must agree to the transgender ideology. If you do not qualify to be a foster family anymore. So what that means is that every child, whether they identify as a transgender or not, when they get into a foster family, will be put through that social contagion. Let me just say, there is no such thing as a transgender child. Everybody needs to feel comfortable saying that. There's no such thing as a transgender child. It's pure child abuse. So
wow.
These are the bills that are in California right now. Some of them have passed. Some of them will pass. SB 107 is already passed. So where does all this lead? Okay, how do they work together? Very simple. Very simple. All of these bill leads to one area: foster care. Why? Because in California, no matter what the other laws are, once it hits foster care, the state can decide on transgender procedures at any age, no consent needed, double mastectomies, castration, drugs. It doesn't matter. The reason why this is so dangerous, beyond the obvious, is that one of the most fertile ground for sex trafficking is foster care. Because a lot of times people don't even know that children are missing. Thousands and thousands of children go missing every year.
Let me interject here. We've only got about a minute left here, but the similarities between sex trafficking and what you refer to as transgender trafficking is shocking. Mm-hmm. But in less than a minute that we have, what can our viewers and listeners do?
Well, the reason why it's so similar, we worked with an organization that says, hey, here are the similarities between sex trafficking, transgender trafficking. The way they groom the children is almost identical. The best thing that parents can do is, we've got the links in your show notes that shows the comparison between the two and how the transgender, the contagion, the transgender recruiters get the children into the cult the same way sex traffickers get them into sex trafficking, sexual exploitation. The best thing that parents can do is to opt your children out of any mental health professional in school. Formal, informal, we have opt-out forms at courageisahabit.org. Look under school counselors. Okay, courageisahabit.org. Look under school counselors. Every single one of those items at the end, as the last page, has an opt-out form written by our attorney. Use it. Make sure your children do not get near those mental health professionals. They're the ones driving a lot of this in schools.
Alvin, we're going to have to leave it right there. Alvin Lui, president of Courage is a Habit. Thank you so much for breaking down this legislation and bringing a dose of reality to us.